Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the shocking twist history tried to hide. The letter that shouldn't exist. Paris 1914. The world is a powder keg, and one spark has already set it ablaze. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. Was the shot heard around the world? But what if I told you that a single letter, hidden away in the shadows, could have stopped the bloodshed before it swallowed millions? The story begins not with a general or a king, but with a trembling hand scratching words on thin parchment. A diplomat, unnamed in the official records, sat beneath the dim glow of a lantern in a Vienna townhouse. Outside, horse hooves echoed against cobblestones, as if the city itself was restless with dread. His quill dripped ink, his words pleading, "If you deliver this, war may yet be avoided." But the letter was never delivered. In smoky cafes, whispers floated. Austria-Hungary would crush Serbia. Russia would rise to defend her. Germany would back Vienna. Britain and France would not stay silent. Yet behind the noise, this letter, sealed with trembling wax, begged for reason, for compromise, for one final chance at peace. We will never know the diplomat's true fear as he tucked the envelope into his coat. Was it desperation? Guilt? The last flicker of hope in a world already sliding into madness? But we do know this. If the letter had reached its intended hands, the dominoes of July 1914 might have toppled differently. Imagine the silence of trenches that would never be dug. Imagine the millions of mothers who would never wear black. Imagine a Europe whose future wasn't built on blood and ruin. And yet, history is not made of what might have been. It is made of choices, of silence, of messages delayed, ignored, or buried. The letter vanished into obscurity, like smoke into the night. Some say it was intercepted by spies. Others whisper it was deliberately destroyed by those who wanted war. But tonight, you will walk with me through those weeks of fevered telegrams, secret meetings, and betrayals, as we search for the truth behind this hidden letter. Because if this letter had reached the right desk, World War I might never have happened, and history as we know it would be unrecognizable. So the question is not just what was written, but who wanted it silenced and why. The letter was sealed. The wax cooled. A messenger prepared to ride through the night. But someone was waiting in the shadows, and that someone would change the fate of the world. A messenger in the night. The streets of Vienna were heavy with summer heat, yet a chill seemed to haunt the air that July night. A lone rider, cloaked in grey, urged his horse through the alleys. His task was simple: deliver an envelope, sealed, fragile, and brimming with hope. But as his breath fogged in the night air, he knew too well that this letter was not an ordinary dispatch. It was peace bound in paper. The messenger's name was Johann, a junior clerk drafted into service for the foreign ministry. He had seen too many debates behind closed doors. Men in stiff uniforms pounding tables, demanding revenge for the Archduke's death. But Johann had also seen hesitation. He had heard the whispers of those who believed Austria was marching blindly toward catastrophe, and now he carried their plea. His orders were clear. The letter was to reach Count Leopold Berchtold, the Austro-Hungarian foreign minister, before dawn. If Berchtold read it, if he paused, if he reconsidered even for a moment, it might change everything. But Vienna was not asleep. Shadows watched from alleys, their eyes sharp beneath the brim of hats. German officers lingered in drawing rooms, pressing their allies toward war. Russian agents prowled the streets, desperate for intelligence. Every corner seemed alive with secrets. Johann's heart pounded as hooves struck stone. He clutched the envelope tighter, the wax seal pressed against his palm, almost burning. And then silence. A figure stepped from the darkness, blocking his path. A man in a black overcoat, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" the stranger asked, his voice too calm for the midnight hour. Johann swallowed, his hand twitching toward the letter. "Official business," he muttered, nudging his horse forward. But the stranger moved with deliberate ease, his gloved hand resting on Johann's bridle. "Official business," the man repeated as if savoring the words. His eyes flicked to the envelope, and in that instant Johann knew the man wasn't curious. He was hunting. The messenger's horse reared, snapping free, and Johann kicked hard, galloping down the narrow street. Behind him, boots pounded stone, The chase had begun. Through winding alleys under gas lamps that flickered like failing stars, Johann rode as if the fate of Europe pressed against his ribs, because in truth it did. At last, the looming facade of the Ballhausplatz rose before him, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Safety was just within reach. But as Johann dismounted, heart hammering, a cold realization struck him. The letter was gone. Somewhere in the night it had slipped from his coat or been taken by unseen hands, and with it perhaps the last hope of peace. Johann's fingers tore through his coat, his eyes wide with disbelief. The envelope was gone. The wax seal that had burned against his palm only moments before had vanished into the night. The cobblestones beneath him blurred as panic took hold. Had he dropped it? Had it been stolen? Every second mattered. The city was alive with whispers of war, and this letter, this single, folded page was meant to scream against the tide of vengeance. Now it was adrift, swallowed by Vienna's shadows. Johann stumbled into the Foreign Ministry courtyard, but his voice broke before he reached the door. What could he say? That peace had slipped through his fingers like smoke. That he, a nameless clerk, had lost a chance to halt Europe's plunge into madness. Inside, chandeliers blazed as diplomats debated into the early hours. Count Berchtold himself leaned over a mahogany table, his face flushed with wine and fury, insisting that Serbia must pay. Around him generals nodded grimly. None of them knew that the only words that might cool the fire had just disappeared into the dark. Meanwhile, not far from the ministry, the letter was in motion. A pair of gloved hands held it now, turning it slowly in the glow of a street lamp. The seal remained unbroken. Curiosity wrestled with caution. The man who held it was no thief by chance. He had been waiting, an informant for the German embassy. His orders were clear: watch, intercept, and report. The name he went by was Herr Weiss. In public, a quiet clerk with tired eyes. In private, a shadow stitched into Vienna's political fabric. To him, the envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to be. Weiss considered. If this message softened Austria's resolve, Germany's designs for swift war might unravel. The Kaiser had pledged the infamous blank check to Vienna, promising unconditional support. Germany needed conflict, decisive, immediate, unstoppable. A letter calling for caution was more dangerous than a dozen enemy armies. He slipped the envelope into his coat. Back at the ministry, Johann lingered in the courtyard, shaking, replaying every street, every corner, searching in vain. He thought of returning to retrace his steps, but dread anchored him. If he admitted the truth, he would be ruined. Worse, if peace failed, millions might pay for his failure. Above him, the city bells struck 3. The world moved closer to dawn, closer to decisions that could never be undone. And at that same moment, Herr Weiss sat alone in his room, a knife poised above the seal of the hidden letter. The wax cracked. The letter was about to be revealed. But what he read inside would shake him to his core. The wax crumbled under Herr Weiss's blade. He slid the parchment free, unfolding it with slow, deliberate care. The candlelight flickered across his face as he began to read. The words were not loud or accusatory. They were desperate, pleas stitched together with trembling ink. If this path is pursued, war will engulf all Europe. The alliance chains will pull nation upon nation into the abyss. Serbia's hand may be stained, but compromise is still possible. Delay, speak once more. Give diplomacy a chance before the cannons speak for us all. Weiss's lips tightened. The letter bore the mark of a respected Austro-Hungarian statesman, an old diplomat, who had long warned of catastrophe. These were not the words of weakness, but of foresight. The writer understood the machinery of alliances better than most. He foresaw Russia mobilizing in defense of Serbia. He foresaw Germany dragged in by oath. He foresaw France, Britain, and countless colonies marching in lockstep toward blood. And the most chilling line: if war begins here, it will not end quickly. It will not end within months. It will devour a generation. Weiss set the letter down, his pulse quickening. Could this be true? Could the empire he served, the empire Germany swore to defend, be sleepwalking into its own ruin? Yet he also knew his orders. The Kaiser's men had made their desires plain. War was not to be prevented. It was to be embraced, steered, and won. This fragile plea was not salvation in their eyes. It was treason. Still, Weiss hesitated. He was a man of shadows, not politics. But as he read the words again, he felt the weight of the world pressing into the ink. Meanwhile, across Vienna, Johann paced his small room, sleepless. He could not shake the image of the letter slipping away. He thought of the diplomat who had entrusted it to him, of the millions of faceless men who might march into fire if its warning was lost. At the Ballhausplatz, Berchtold drafted ultimatums. In Berlin, telegrams carried steel-edged promises. In St. Petersburg, Tsarist ministers murmured of mobilization. The hourglass was draining, and only one fragile letter held a chance to slow the sand. Weiss rose abruptly, shoving the parchment back into its envelope. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the knowledge that he now held history itself. If he delivered the letter, perhaps peace could still breathe. If he destroyed it, war would thunder across Europe. But Weiss was not the only man aware of the letter's existence. In the shadows of a nearby tavern, another set of eyes had watched him, tracked him, followed him, and as Weiss tucked the envelope away, a pistol hammer clicked behind him. "Hand it over," a voice whispered. "Now." Herr Weiss-Frotze. The chill of steel pressed against the back of his neck. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands. The candle flame trembled on the wall, throwing his long shadow across the room. Behind him, the voice growled again. The envelope. Slide it across the table. Weiss's mind raced. Whoever stood there knew exactly what he carried. This was no random thug. It was someone with orders, someone with a cause. "You don't understand," Weiss said, his voice low but steady. "This letter isn't—" "Silence," the man snapped. The gun's barrel nudged harder into his skin. Weiss caught a glimpse in the reflection of the window. A lean figure in a worker's coat, face obscured by a scarf, eyes sharp with purpose. A spy, no doubt. But for whom? Was it Russian, Serbian, or perhaps even an Austrian who wanted the letter in safer hands? Weiss's mind clawed at possibilities. The letter was too dangerous. It carried truth sharper than any bullet. Whoever possessed it could sway the balance between peace and war. "Slide it," the intruder ordered again. Weiss moved slowly, laying the envelope flat on the table. His fingers lingered on it for a moment too long, and the man snarled. "Now stand back." Weiss obeyed, his heart hammering. For an instant the room seemed to still, the candlelight, the ragged breath of the intruder, the faint hum of carriages outside. The world balanced on that single piece of paper. But then fate twisted. From outside, boots thundered up the stairs. A fist slammed against the door. "Open in the name of the police." The intruder cursed, snatched the envelope, and darted toward the back window. The gun glinted once more as he glanced over his shoulder. "Forget what you saw, or you'll forget how to breathe." And with that, he was gone, vanishing into the night as the door splintered and uniformed. Officers burst inside. Weiss stood frozen, the empty table before him. His chance to decide the fate of Europe had been stolen in seconds. The police demanded explanations, but Weiss offered none. To reveal the letter's existence was to expose himself, to risk the wrath of Berlin. He let them search, let them bark questions, while his thoughts burned. Who had taken it? And where was it going? Outside, the thief moved quickly through the alleys, clutching the letter to his chest. His steps echoed in the silence, driven by something more powerful than fear. He knew the words inside. He knew what they meant, and he knew exactly where they needed to go. But in a city already drowning in spies, his path would not remain secret for long. Because by dawn, 2 other nations would know the letter existed, and both would kill to control it. The thief ran like a shadow through Vienna's labyrinth of alleys, clutching the envelope beneath his coat. His lungs burned, but he did not slow. Somewhere behind him, whistles shrieked as police spread through the streets, searching for the man who had slipped through their grasp. His name was not recorded in any official history, but among the underground networks of spies and agitators, he was known as Luka. Born in Belgrade, raised among whispers of rebellion, he had slipped into Vienna weeks earlier, under forged papers. To Luka, this letter was more than ink and parchment. It was a weapon, and perhaps the only one that could prevent his homeland from being swallowed whole. He ducked into a tavern cellar, breath ragged, candlelight stinging his eyes. With trembling hands, he unfolded the letter, scanning the words that pleaded for peace. His chest tightened. Here it was, proof that not all Austrians thirsted for Serbia's destruction. Proof that the empire could still be swayed. If this reached the right desk in Belgrade, perhaps war could be delayed. Perhaps diplomacy could breathe again. But Luca was not alone in the city. The German embassy had already received whispers of a missing dispatch. Their agents fanned out, searching for any sign of it. The Russians, too, had their ears in every tavern and market, desperate to know Austria's next move. Even the British envoy had been warned of a letter dangerous in its intentions. Vienna was no longer a city of waltzes. It was a city of spies. As dawn's light crept across the rooftops, Luca pushed onward. Knowing every step tightened the noose around his neck. He needed safe passage out of Austria. He needed allies. And so he turned to the only man he trusted, a Serbian sympathizer, working as a porter at the train station. The plan was simple: disguise himself, board a night train, and carry the letter across the border. But plans in Vienna rarely survived the night, because even as Luca whispered his intentions in the porter's ear, a pair of sharp eyes watched from across the platform. Herr Weiss, bruised by failure, had followed the trail. He recognized the envelope at once. Rage and duty collided within him. The letter had to be recovered, destroyed, before it reached Serbia. Weiss slipped into the shadows of the station, waiting for his moment. The whistle of the departing train echoed like a warning. Luca stepped forward, ticket in hand, the letter hidden against his chest. And just as he reached for the carriage door, a gloved hand closed around his arm. Weiss's voice was ice. "You're not going anywhere." Luca spun, his eyes locking onto Herr Weiss's steely gaze. For a heartbeat, the bustling station around them seemed to vanish. The clatter of luggage, the hiss of steam, the murmur of passengers all faded beneath the sharp tension crackling between the two men. "You don't understand," Luca hissed, trying to wrench his arm free. "This letter could stop what's coming." Weiss tightened his grip. His voice was calm, but his jaw was set like iron. "I know exactly what it could do, and that's why I can't let you deliver it." The words cut through Luca like a blade. His suspicions were confirmed. This man wasn't just another spy. He was part of the machinery dragging Europe toward war. Around them, the station pulsed with motion. A conductor shouted for passengers to board. The whistle screamed again. The train would leave in moments. Luca's chance at escape was vanishing. With sudden force, he shoved Weiss backward and darted toward the carriage steps. But Weiss was fast, faster than a man burdened by doubt should be. He caught Luca's coat, yanking him down onto the platform. The two men crashed to the ground, fists colliding, boots scraping against stone. The envelope tumbled loose, sliding across the floor. Both men froze for an instant, eyes fixed on the paper fluttering like a wounded bird. Then they lunged. Weiss's hand struck first, his fingers brushing the seal, but Luca slammed his elbow into the German's ribs, snatching the letter up before bolting through the crowd. "Stop him!" Weiss roared, but his voice was drowned by the churning steam as the train lurched forward. Luca leapt onto the last carriage, gripping the railing as the platform blurred away. For a moment it seemed he had won. The letter was still his. Belgrade was only hours away. Perhaps he could yet deliver the message that might stall Austria's fury. But Weiss was not finished. He sprinted alongside the moving train, eyes blazing, before seizing a ladder near the baggage car. With a surge of strength, he hauled himself aboard. The train thundered into the night, carrying both men and the letter into the unknown. Inside, passengers whispered as the two figures disappeared between carriages. They could not know that in those shadows, the future of Europe was being fought over by two men who had never commanded armies, never worn crowns, but now carried the weight of nations in their struggle. On the rattling roof of the train, wind tearing at their coats, Luca and Weiss faced one another once more. The letter was clutched in Luca's hand, and Weiss whispered through the roar of steel and wind, "One of us won't leave this train alive." The night air screamed across the roof of the train as sparks flew from the wheels below. Luca clung to the letter with one hand, the other braced against the rattling steel. Across from him, Weiss crouched low, his eyes glinting like a predator's. "This ends here," Weiss shouted above the roar of the wind. Luca's grip tightened on the envelope. "If it ends here, it ends with millions dead." The train surged through the countryside, lanterns flashing past like ghosts. Their coats whipped violently in the storm of speed. Every step was treacherous, every movement a gamble with gravity. Weiss lunged first, tackling Luca hard against the roof. The impact knocked the breath from Luca's lungs, and the letter nearly slipped free. Desperation flared in his chest. This paper was not just ink, it was hope, fragile but alive. He could not let it fall. They wrestled, boots scraping against iron, fingers clawing for control. Luca slammed his fist into Weiss's jaw, sending the German sprawling. For a moment, Weiss dangled dangerously over the edge, the black void of night yawning beneath him. But his hand snapped forward, catching a rail. With a grunt, he swung himself back, more furious than ever. "You think words will stop this machine?" Weiss spat. "War is already written. Your letter changes nothing." Luca's voice cracked with defiance. "Then why are you trying so hard to destroy it?" The question hung between them, heavier than the wind. Weiss faltered, not in body but in spirit. Deep inside, a splinter of doubt had been growing since the first time he read the letter. Was he defending his country? Or condemning it? But doubt did not stay his hand. With a roar, Weiss charged again, fists pounding. Luca staggered back, clutching the envelope, when suddenly, disaster. A sudden jolt shook the carriage. Luca slipped, the letter flying loose into the air. Time slowed as the paper spun in the wind, its seal catching the faint glow of moonlight. Both men lunged. Weiss caught Luca's wrist. Luca caught the letter. And for a terrifying instant, the three of them, man, enemy, and fragile plea for peace, were bound together on the edge of a rushing abyss. Luca heaved, dragging himself upright, but Weiss's strength was relentless. He twisted Luca's arm, forcing him to cry out. The letter crumpled under the strain, nearly torn in two. And then the shriek of a whistle. The train barreled toward a bridge, its beams looming in the darkness. Neither man had time to think. They were about to be thrown into chaos neither could control. The train screamed onto the bridge, its iron frame rattling like bones under strain. Below, a river foamed white, moonlight slicing across its surface. Wind howled through the beams, tearing at Luca and Weiss as they clung to the roof, locked in their desperate struggle. The letter was crumpled between them, each man's grip a death sentence for the other. "Let go," Weiss bellowed, his voice raw. "Never," Luca roared back. "This letter is the only chance to stop the slaughter you're helping unleash." The bridge groaned as the train thundered forward. Sparks exploded from the wheels. Below, the drop was certain death. Weiss forced Luca back, each shove edging him closer to the void. His strength was greater, but Luca fought with something Weiss could not match: conviction. For Luca, this letter was not ink and parchment. It was his homeland's last breath, his people's last hope. The roar of the river grew louder as the train neared the midpoint of the bridge. Suddenly Luca wrenched free, slamming his forehead into Weiss's temple. The German reeled, and for a moment, the envelope fluttered loose, nearly sucked into the night. Both men scrambled after it, knees scraping, lungs heaving. Luca's fingers closed around the paper, victory for just an instant. But Weiss's hand shot out, not for the letter this time, but for Luca's throat. The world narrowed to choking gasps, fists, and the ceaseless scream of steel. The letter crumpled against Luca's chest, his vision swimming. He saw not Weiss's face, but flashes of what was at stake. Young men in uniforms marching, mothers clutching telegrams, cities reduced to rubble. With a final surge, Luca drove his knee upward, breaking Weiss's grip. Both men collapsed, gasping, the envelope crushed between them. And then a shot rang out. The crack of a pistol shattered the roar of the train. Luca froze, his ears ringing. Weiss's eyes went wide. A figure stood on the adjoining carriage, arm outstretched, pistol smoking in the night. The muzzle flash lit his face, a sharp, cold expression. It wasn't Austrian police. It wasn't German agents. It wasn't Serbian allies. It was someone else entirely. The man stepped forward, coat whipping in the wind, voice cutting through the storm. "You've both had your fun," he said. "But the letter belongs to us now." Neither Luca nor Weiss could move. The newcomer's eyes glinted with ruthless certainty. The letter, fragile and battered, slipped from Luca's grip, and the stranger's boot pinned it against the roof. The pistol gleamed in the moonlight, steady in the stranger's hand. Luca and Weiss froze, their chests heaving, eyes fixed on the boot that now held the letter against the trembling roof of the train. The man's accent carried above the roar of steel and wind, clipped, precise. "British intelligence," he said coldly. "You've both risked your lives for this scrap of paper. But peace," his lip curled. "Oh, peace is not Britain's priority." Weiss's jaw tightened. "You can't mean—" "I mean," the agent snapped, "that this war is inevitable. My government knows it. Germany knows it. Russia knows it. The empire is already falling into the abyss, and we will not stand aside. The balance of Europe demands it." Luca's heart sank. He had fought, bled, nearly died for this letter, this plea from an old diplomat who had dared to hope. And now before his eyes the letter was reduced to a pawn in a game of nations. "No," Luca whispered, crawling forward despite the pistol leveled at him. "You don't understand. If this reaches Belgrade, there's still time, still a chance to stop it." The agent's eyes burned with something, between pity and contempt. "You think words can stop empires? This war will not be prevented by ink. It will be written in blood." With that he bent, plucked the envelope from beneath his boot, and raised it to the night sky. For one fragile moment it fluttered in his hand, the last breath of peace, trembling between salvation and silence. Then, without hesitation, he tore it in two. The parchment shredded, its fragments carried off into the darkness by the rushing wind. Luca's cry was drowned by the roar of the train. Weiss closed his eyes, not in triumph, but in hollow resignation. The deed was done. By dawn the train pulled into Budapest. The three men parted into different shadows. Luca consumed by grief, Weiss bound once more by duty, and the British agent vanishing into the machinery of empire. None of their names would be remembered. None would be written in the textbooks. But the letter, the hidden plea that could have slowed the world's march into madness, was gone. And weeks later, when cannons thundered across Europe, when trenches carved scars into the earth, when millions of sons were buried beneath mud and fire, no one knew that a single letter had once offered another path. History records the war as inevitable, but history forgets what almost was. Perhaps somewhere in the whispers of Vienna, Paris, Berlin, or Belgrade, someone still remembers the words of that lost letter. Give diplomacy a chance before the cannons speak for us all. But the cannons did speak, and the world has never forgotten their echo. If you were amazed by this video, make sure to subscribe and join us for more gripping facts from history, where secrets, betrayal, and courage come alive. Don't forget to like, share, and comment which historical twist shocked you the most.